Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the new faction added to Gems of War of the Fire Rift. One thing pretty relevant about it as well is it is technically the final faction added to Gems of War, as its location would kind of tell, as they were planning this way in advance, given that the entire underworld is pretty much centered around this place. But anyways, we will still be getting more into the future as more kingdoms come into the game, of course. But for all intents and purposes, this is basically the final faction added to the game. So this is a brown-red faction, obviously associated to Broken Spire, as lore-wise, that's kind of how it all started. Well, technically in Sin Mirage, but because of Luther in that storyline in Sin Mirage. But it was technically... well, because of that. But anyways, associated Broken Spire, it does allow it to reach 21 star. The relevant thing about this is this does allow for an extra bonus of HP if you can reach 20 star, and this new faction does allow you to do so for that permanent bonus. Unfortunately, the other permanent bonus will be able to reach 8,750, meaning we still need one more faction at some point in order to get that magic. We probably will at some point. Obviously, this isn't like the last faction ever, but we currently don't know when on earth the next kingdom's coming. So when it does, it'll eventually get a faction, that will eventually push it over. But until then, this is the final faction in the game. So it's a brown-red. It has 2 guaranteed treasure rooms. Those 2 guaranteed treasure rooms are both out on the bottom path, meaning theoretically, given that it has a nice 3-room middle, so really good rush method. You just take the first 1 to 5 and then go straight to the boss room. This is a nice layout to have if you just want to get it done nice and quickly for just getting all the rewards. However, if this tier 5 something really annoying and you don't want to go down that way when doing something like a peer faction or something, you actually can go down the bottom path, even though you will have to deal with this tier 4. The 2 tier 3s are both a positive effect of some kind. So if you have 2 really good positive effects, like one of these is having agile for the final fight, is super ridiculously good. So if you're doing like a peer faction, you might want to just double check what your tier 5 is relative to your 2 guaranteed treasure rooms down here, which is this room and this room, because the 2 benefits that you might get if you get like deft touch into like agile might be worthwhile to actually go down this path and just take more rooms for the peer faction than it is just to go straight down, especially if it's like something like the entangle room or something very annoying in the middle. If I'm not mistaken, this one does web, which is also kind of annoying, though actually somewhat relevant, because your main win condition for peer factions is could be spamming the legends AoE damage. As far as the troops themselves, they're pretty underwhelming, except for the mythic. The mythic, the legend, I should say. We will be getting more troops for factions into the future, though. That's something else that's going to be coming in with factions now that we technically have all of them. But that's coming up soon, TM, not quite yet. But anyways, every faction still only has 4, of course. But as far as the 4 that we got here, the only one that's really worthwhile mentioning is the Magma Dragon, mostly because the brown-red lava storm that it does. This is pretty much the main gimmick of this thing not being useless. Inside the context of the faction, it's probably not going to do too much, other than just kind of help you get mana when you're using it as your pure team, because there's not really much else in this faction. However, outside that context, there are quite a few combinations that can end up using brown-red. I personally haven't really done too much delving into this, as far as seeing, get it, delving, but I haven't really checked much to see what on earth brown-red synergies it can end up getting, though there are definitely some pretty obvious ones as far as like hero, brown hero class, the mass mana accumulators that can end up incorporating it, and just the fact that a lot of things can end up utilizing it for pretty high damage, as brown is a pretty defensive color, combined with the red that is a very offensive one, which works really good in various skull spam teams. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how this pans out, if it will actually be incorporated, because double storms are actually more effective than a single storm as far as putting the colors that you need onto a board. Is some of the reasons why Phoenicia sometimes ran with a double storm like red-yellow rather than just going like a red storm or yellow storm or a green storm or something, because you do overall get more mana from the double storm towards the troop that you're trying to fill, assuming it uses both of them, compared to having a single colored storm. So while these don't have too much of a viability in the current state of the game, as we keep getting more and more of them combined with just options that exist in the game, they will become viable, and this definitely seems like one that will be towards the more viable side. As far as running in pure faction, is basically the only thing you'll be using. It just does damage to all enemies, boosted by red and brown, so getting a little bit extra damage there, though the base damage is likely going to be a bulk of it, given that pure faction 500 has ridiculously high stats. Everything else here pretty underwhelming. Fire Spirit's basically just a worse version of Hellcat. It just converts all gems of a chosen color to red gems, specifically burning gems, but that's all it does, no follow-up of any kind beyond that. Lava Scorpion's supposed to be the tank for this faction, however it is so incompetent at tanking with no even score reduction or anything related to that. It doesn't even have score reflect. It doesn't really have anything else to really tank with other than its durability off its cast, and for the most part you're just not going to touch this compared to just using another copy to Legends, and the other one just does some splash damage, which just isn't really worth it compared to the other options that are within this place, most notably 4 of the Mythic. But anyways, as far as the weapon, we did end up getting a new weapon as well, which I actually cannot find it here and forget what it's called, so we shall check the shop screen. So if we go to games and go to the actual event itself, of course, with the new faction, that will be going on until this Monday and all the way until the end of Sunday there. As far as the shop, you end up getting it off of Tier 4. You can also craft it in Soulforge this weekend if you prefer getting it that way. Though, given that you're probably doing progress on the faction, it's probably just better to get it with gems here, assuming you have the resources to do so. As far as the weapon, it deals damage to an enemy and then converts all blue gems to burning gems. Nothing too special, though it does have a little bit of a convert with a damage poke. Nothing really too special off its effects, though it does give 2 red mana to all allies, so it can kind of build into somewhat of a red team. But because you are converting into burning gems, which of course burning gems do count as red, which give you mana accumulation off of that red. But burning gems are just a really bad mechanic overall. Any of the status effect gems I feel like have been bad in the current state of the game, mostly because it's better just to do something that can consistently apply the status effect rather than putting the gem of it specifically on the board. This applies to the freeze that currently no troop has, it applies to stun, and it applies to burning gems. Burning gems in particular because it actually does it to the entire team. So if you're using a team and you're just doing this, you take one of those red gems or the burning gem and you get the entire enemy team burned. That's decent, even though there's other ways to do it. But then the enemy just takes your same burning gem, does it against you, and now you're burning as well. So it's just a weird situation where basically if you're using the mechanic, particularly burning gems because it does it all 4 at once, you're essentially just going to be playing a match where all 8 troops are burning. And while there are some situations where this might be useful, like if you have troops that proc their ability based on when they take damage, particularly to HP, even though that won't hit the HP initially, but you know, any kind of mechanic that kind of centers around taking a bunch of small HP damage with like poison, burning, stuff like that, it can kind of be incorporated into that. But for the most part, the burning gem mechanic is not needed for any team that currently exists. There are better ways to 4 times burn within the game, most notably Zugoff and Infernus. Even though they're both high rarity troops, they are substantially better. There's some okay low rarity stuff that can still apply some burn. It's just really not worth using burning gems, and yeah, it just doesn't do anything special. It's not like it does some like red spam on top of it or anything else. It just simply burns. So overall, I would stay away from the burning gem mechanic, as well as many of the similar ones that just apply stats effects. They're just not really that worth using in the current state of the game. Maybe that will change as time goes on, or maybe they'll kind of have some game modes within the future that will kind of incorporate a lot of the power gems that they've been adding to kind of have it as some kind of thing where you can apply stats effects. But as it currently stands, anything with burning gem, basically useless. And that mythic, or that legend kind of does it as well. I keep saying mythic because of course the new mythic that came out today, which we covered a little bit earlier. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty average faction with pretty average troops, with the only thing being viable being the new legend. Anyways, let's go get into all of the teams for this faction, as there are a couple here. So as far as what I ran for the lower range, I actually ran this almost to 200, though you normally want to stop around the 100, 150 range. But it's basically any mana accumulation weapon with the kind of standard, if you can't run Rowain, run the other Rowain, which is Guard's Avatar. Pretty standard team with this, except we're using Harpy Mage instead of like a Leprechaun or anything, because it is a red-brown restriction. So unfortunately, we can't use something like a Leprechaun, but you can use Harpy Mage. Harpy Mage is basically a second turn in power. It has Swift, but you get 2 mana per turn off the enchant potion off the very first thing that you get if you bought any of the tiers for the event. So she'll start with 10 mana, and then you simply go straight into the 14 and you'll be good to go. Because on the first turn you go from 10 to 12 from the Swift combined with the enchant, and then on the other turn you simply go all the way to 14, and then you have full mana. The other option, of course, as you keep going a little bit deeper, is just kind of some kind of standard either High King Iron Gut and or Zugoff team. This is mostly just for any kind of mana accumulation up front. You can replace it for whatever you want. High King Iron Gut doing the Venture Devour, Zugoff for the Skull Spam. You can even run a first slot High King Iron Gut if you don't mind risking it in order to get quicker speed off the High King Iron Gut. And then Harpy Mage, similarly, because we can't run Leprechaun, Thrall, and some of the other ones, is basically just a second turn in power for a bunch of mana accumulation. Also, if you don't want to run Mountain Crusher, you can also use that as the way that you get Brownstorm in order to get High King Iron Gut his mana going. Otherwise, this also just allows Perpetual Brownstorm off of your hero class doing it, the Mountain Crusher doing it, and your Harpy Mage doing it, so you can kind of keep cycling through that. If you're looking for something cheaper, Tesla was available, I believe, earlier this year, a couple weeks ago in Soulforge, so if you end up picking her up, which hopefully you did because she's such a good troop to have, it's a good low rarity option. She is a legend, but when she comes in Soulforge, I highly advise getting her if you don't already have it. It is just such a good pickup. And if you happen to be able to get your hands on it when you open any keys at any point, great troop to consider. It's kind of like Rowan with its boost ratio, except it boosts based on everything and does true damage. This is pretty relevant because it boosts on the enemy stats, so as the enemy keeps getting higher and higher, you also scale with them, meaning that you can basically take out any piece of content with Tesla as your damage scales to whatever they are. While it will still be a little bit lower if your stats are lower, it is mostly dependent on the enemy's team when you're fighting higher pieces of content, because even later in the game, your stats relative to how much the enemy scales is not that much, so having lower stats doesn't really affect you too much as you're gaining most of your stats, since you mostly use this in high level situations rather than PvP and such. You mostly use it against really strong enemies. It tends to get most of its scaling off the enemy rather than your own stats, even though you could raise your own stats with armor gains. Most of it's coming from the enemy, and you'd be better off with mana accumulation combined with it in most situations. In this situation, we're running Essence of Evil for mana accumulation. Go disable it. You get this weapon for free from 250 wins off the Plague hero class from Darkstone. The Teslas just do all their damage with their ability, and this is the main gimmick of the team. You can also just run with one Tesla and run with another mana accumulation or another true damage if you wish. And then Angry Mob, well, a couple other mana accumulators you could do here like Marilith and such. It's mostly just the mana accumulation to hold down the line. It also has backup resummon, so if your hero happens to die, as this is the cheaper team and you might have lower stats and not be able to keep it alive even with Barrier, this and Entangle that you technically have off of Essence of Evil, you can end up getting a backup Angry Mob summon, and this will tank your Teslas to make sure they don't die. And if two of them die, then you will have 3 Angry Mobs combined with a Tesla, and as long as that third Tesla stays alive, you should pretty much be good to go, as the safest slot in Gems of War, of course, is the third slot based on how things currently hit in the current state of the game. So yeah, you just have your Angry Mob there, just keep summoning, and worst comes to worst, you'll have 3 Angry Mobs with a Tesla by the end of the battle or the end of the faction. But as long as your one Tesla survives, you should be able to keep going regardless of how much of your front of your team dies, even if you're using this lower rarity team. Anyways, as far as, and you can run it for all of them from 220 to 50, or do 500, I mean. And lastly, of course, Pure Faction. I kind of already mentioned it earlier, but just for the team for copy-paste, of course, all of them will be in the description as per usual. If you want to go copy-paste any of these, it's just 4 times Magma Dragon. The tank isn't really worth using. The Mana Generator just isn't really worth using. You could maybe incorporate one of them if you really wanted to. Probably more so the Mana Accumulator if you're going to do one or the other, as the tank is pretty underwhelming. But you really don't need it. 4 times Magma Dragon. It's one of those factions where you just run forward to Legend. This tends to be the case for quite a few of them, where the Legend is just decent enough compared to the rest of the options that you just want to spam it 4 times over. Normally, quite a few other kingdoms can end up going for some kind of mana accumulator instead or something else, but the viability of what currently exists within this faction is just not that good, so you're probably just going to be better off spamming for, especially when you have potions active. You might actually end up incorporating the mana accumulator if you don't have potions, though if you're running it during this weekend, you most likely, or definitely if you're running 500 Pure Faction, you would definitely have had potions, which means you have enchant, which means you'll be able to go and get his mana up passively, even though he's blocked by 3 other things that uses exact mana, because worst comes to worst, you just put a 20% mana start on him. He'll start with, I believe, 3, 4, somewhere around there. So after like what, 5, 6 or 7 turns or so, he'll end up having full mana. So you then just cast them out. You'll have all of them, even if they were fully blocked, and you just have full big AOE hits that you then just keep tanking with. You keep just throwing them down. You ideally want to go into the final battle with Pure Faction with at least 3 of them alive. That's your main goal. If you lose one, that's not too big a deal. You'll probably lose one in the middle tier 5, as the most likely route will be you'll easily win the first battle with all 4 of them. You might lose your first slot in the middle battle because it's a tier 5 with high stats that might have scroll spam, and then ideally with those 3 you have to win the Pure Faction. That's basically how this Pure Faction is likely going to be going down. First battles is easy win, middle you'll die once, and then the final will just be 3 Magma Dragons versus the final. Or if you're going to put your Mana Accumulator in there, you might actually want to put it into second slot, just so it can end up, or well, second or third, depends how you kind of want to do it, just so it can kind of tank a little bit for 1 or 2 of the Magma Dragons, as even though it doesn't have like any kind of actual tank ability, it dying isn't as important as something like the Magma Dragon dying, for example. So could maybe go with like a second slot for once. Normally you kind of put it in third to keep it a little bit safer, but this might be a situation where it might actually be more viable to keep it in second if you're going to run like Magma Dragon Converter Magma, though I'm personally just going to be running forward to Dragon, have 3 going into final, and hopefully that'll be enough. We'll find out. We'll be doing Pure Faction tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I didn't have a nightly stream last night, mostly because I wanted to be rested for the stream. We already covered on the faction. If you wanted to see more content on it, we already did quite a bit of the faction, as well as some conversation, messing with the mythic, all that good stuff. We did a stream for that earlier today. But of course, we will be back to doing the 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time streams. Also, as I kind of mentioned in the other video, though I do kind of want to reiterate for some people that might not care about the mythic because they already see how bad it is, so they're not even going to check the video if you are under that category. I did just want to mention, since I haven't really covered that many videos lately, I do still have work going on the house right now. We've been getting quite a bit of decking work done, a little bit of plumbing. They're going to be painting today, so I'm not even going to be around. It was just in entirety. It's been kind of hard to try to get some stuff recorded during the day, so I haven't been able to get the weekly video out, though that will be out soon. But I did want to get all the stuff out as quickly as I could for, of course, the new stuff that came out today, as this is a pretty big deal. The final faction in the game, I can't believe it has already happened. Of course, we'll still be getting a trickle of them in the future, but for all intents and purposes, every faction now exists. We now have every hero class, we now have every faction, as well as everything for pretty much every kingdom as it currently stands in the current state of the game. Obviously, more will be coming slowly into the future, as far as new kingdoms, which will bring new factions, which will bring new hero classes and all that stuff. But for now, it is the final faction of the game, right in the dead center of the underworld map. But anyways, guys, if you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys later. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and best of luck with the faction if you're going to be trying for it, as well as the best of luck with the new mythic if you're going to be trying for that useless thing. Goodbye, everyone, and catch you later.